fall camp. It's tough to glean a lot as much as camp is closed nowadays. But what have you gleaned in the opening week or so?
Everybody's happy. Uh, Everybody's optimistic, and that's kind of a universal thing this time of year. If your team reports for a preseason camp and then goes through media interviews and even one player says, I don't think we're going to be that good this year. Maybe we'll get better, but I'm just not really sure. If you get that, you've got problems. Tennessee doesn't have that. Uh, I, I really enjoyed listening to offensive coordinator Joe Halsley. Uh, he's a really bright guy, very articulate. He can explain things really well. Not all coaches can. Uh, Josh Heupel doesn't give you much. That's just not his style. But I think Halsley complements uh, Heupel well. They've been together for about 8 years, I think. He was the quarterback's coach. So a lot of things he said, you don't know how much of this is preseason bluster and how much of it is very real. But I think it's elevated my opinion of Joe Milton. Um, they have a lot of confidence in this guy, and when Joe Halsley explains why, it makes sense. I've changed my opinion of Joe Milton. I changed my opinion after the Orange Bowl last season.
Well,
So I think it's
to give a little background, you were kind of in that group that the play against Ole Miss when he jumped out of bounds was just so bad that it was really tough for you to move on from, which I can completely understand. Is that safe to say?
yeah. If I'd have been the coach, I would never have wanted to look at him again. You can keep your scholarship, but just don't come around me. It would have been that kind of deal. No, that was just an awful play. I don't understand to this day why he did it, but since then, the way he improved last year, uh, and even his in interviews, he seems different than he did 2 years ago when we first interviewed him after he had transferred from Michigan, and he was ordained as a starting quarterback at that time. Lost the job, but he speaks with confidence. I think he's very comfortable in this offense. I think it's very important to keep an open mind when you're judging teams or players. I try to do that. I did that with Joe Milton, and my opinion changed for the better.
And before we get to Caleb Calhoun, Jacob Warren, what do people need to do?
What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Warren asking you to like, subscribe, and share. Dave needs this.
He does. All right, there you go, Caleb. What do you got for John Adams on this Tuesday?
So, John, you brought up Joe Milton, and 247 Sports Clint Brewster did a ranking of all Power 5 quarterbacks going into this year, and he's got Joe Milton down at number 20. And I feel like nobody knows what to make of Joe Milton at this point because I've heard Heisman talk in some instances, and then I hear he's number 20 on just Power 5 quarterbacks. I talked about this yesterday. He wasn't even a top 50 player according to PFF. Is this one of the most unsure scenarios you've ever seen surrounding a quarterback at Tennessee going into a year?
Yeah, I think you've got a lot of wild predictions on Joe Milton. And part of it, some people that are very high on Joe Milton, I think a factor in that is he's really a football oddity, the way he can throw the ball. I mean, if you've got a guy you think can throw it over the Empire State Building, that turns heads. And just his sheer arm strength wins over some people. So I also think that Orange Bowl, that was a pretty good Clemson team, not a great Clemson team, but that performance under pressure was boosted his stock very much. And then you have people that are still, I hear this from fans. It's really not any different from fans than it is from quote experts. They just say, well, I know he's got talent. I hope he could do it, but I'm still not quite sure till I watch him play this season. So there is a twinge of uncertainty involving him.
No, I think there is, and I don't know that goes away until he gets the first big win or he quarterbacks the first big loss. Quite frankly, I think a lot of people that are there in the middle that are hoping the best for Joe Milton, deep down a little bit, want to see Nico as well. I was taken away. You mentioned Joey Halsey's comments, and then I want to get to what the H brought to you by Zen Sports. But you mentioned Joey Halsey's comments, and you came away with one thing. I came away with another, that he thinks that Nico Iamaleava is ready to play, ready to start the season if something were to happen with Joe Milton. I know you were at the press conference whenever they brought out Joey. I guess that was last week. Did you come away with that aspect of it all, that Nico was surprisingly ready to go if they needed him?
Yes, they talked more about his maturity than they did the physical skills, and not just the coaches, the players, the teammates. I think they were expecting one thing and they got another. I think they're expecting a guy, the $1 million bonus baby comes in. Hey guys, I'm ready to win the Heisman. Help me out a little bit and I'll do the rest. No, they got just the opposite. Very low key guy. He's very comfortable talking to the media, and he talks to the media as though he's just talking to somebody he just met. He doesn't it's not as though he's trying to perform and look good for the media. This is enhancing his brand, of course. No, it's just more of a conversational approach. He's not psyching himself up for this venture. He's just being himself. I thought that was interesting. And they have players and coaches, Halsey in particular, talked about his calmness. Uh, Again, like Joe Milton, he still has to do it in games. He's not a big, thick guy. And that's one thing to keep in mind. You look at Joe Milton, he is a pretty thick guy. He's huge. And Iamaleava is tall, but he doesn't have that thickness. You give him just 1 year in a college weight room and you'll see him develop. I remember how thin Peyton Manning was when he showed up, really thin. And he became a starter before the season was done. It's not something you can't overcome, but you wonder about that in going through a 12-game season.
Yep. I agree. Casey Clausen, I still remember his pro day. Scout said to me the worst mistake he ever made was taking off his shirt. He never got a lot bigger, and he was able to be a highly regarded quarterback in the SEC and beyond. Let's get to what the H, and that has to do with Joe Milton. It's brought to you by Zen Sports. Zen Sports is the new sports book in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash for a welcome bonus. Earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with code HOOK. That's right. Hooked, unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting, keep earning, and with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month. After that, you can refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. And that leads us to what the H?
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
So usually when we ask what the H, Caleb and I have a really strong direction that we want to go. So for instance, a good what the H would be, why is Joe Milton considered the best quarterback in the nation, or the 55th best quarterback in the nation? But here we're sitting at 20, and John, I want to kind of ask you, and I want to ask Caleb the same thing. What the H, should we be taken aback that he's among the top 20 with his limited play? Or should it be what the H? He should be higher. He played well against Clemson, and he played well against Vanderbilt, but he's had other times where he's played well, and he has all the ability in the world. So should he be higher? So how does what the H, in honor of the late Norm Macdonald, how does it strike you first, John?
Well, again, there's just ambivalence about Joe Milton because he hasn't done it that often. He only has 4 starts. Well, no, I don't remember how many games he started at Michigan, but he's lost 2 starting jobs in his career. And he's had 4 starts at Tennessee, some good, some bad. And the Clemson game is a big plus for him. But there's just enough uncertainty where I think if you put him in the top 10, I would be surprised at that. I'm not saying he won't be in the top 10. I'm just saying based on what we've seen, I guess top 20 is about right. There are a lot of experienced quarterbacks and a lot of experienced quarterbacks in offensive systems that produce big numbers. And so when you think about that in the whole country, being in the top 20 is pretty good based on his resume so far. But one thing I think is very important when you look at Joe Milton and how good he might be, you got to look at Josh Heupel's track record. He's one of the best offensive coaches in the country. He may be the best.
Well, let me ask you both this. Caleb, let me start with you. Where would you have Joe Milton ranked in the SEC, which I think we would all agree is a down year in quarterbacks?
Yeah, and this list has Joe Milton sixth among SEC quarterbacks. For context, you say it's down. No SEC quarterbacks are top 5. Jaden Daniels comes in the highest at number 7.
Wow.
And then Joe Milton is 6th at number 20. So there's 6 SEC quarterbacks in there. But if you're going based on production, looking at the quarterbacks ahead of him, can't argue with Jaden Daniels. I can't argue with Devin Leary at Kentucky. I can't argue with Spencer Rattler right now. I can't argue Will Rogers at Mississippi State, and I can't argue KJ Jefferson. The only player that I would consider putting him ahead of is Will Rogers because I haven't seen Will Rogers without Mike Leach coaching him. But outside of that, I got to agree. And John, to your point about him losing 2 starting jobs, I talked about this yesterday. I have very tight DMV connections, obviously, and a lot of friends who went to Virginia Tech. Ask Virginia Tech fans about Hendon Hooker right when he first left for Tennessee. They were not happy to lose him, and they wanted Justin Fuente fired. Ask Michigan fans about losing Joe Milton to Tennessee. They did not care.
No, that's a good point. And when you look at the SEC quarterbacks, I'm not sold on Devin Leary. Again, there's some uncertainty about him. He was injured last year. He had a great year in 21, put up really big numbers. He did it in the ACC, not the SEC. So that's a question there about him. KJ Jefferson, Tim Tebow-like runner, can make big plays. I like him, but I don't know. I'm not sold on his throwing ability, in part because I don't know about Arkansas's receiving core. It doesn't dazzle me. So in Will Rogers, fish out of water. He grew up in this system. He grew up in the air raid. That's what he played in high school. Will Rogers is not real mobile in the pocket. He's not a guy that's going to elude a defender or break away when somebody has his leg in a vice there behind center. So I just think when you bring that up, and I guess I would probably think of him as maybe if I were picking a quarterback, I would probably pick him 4th. But with his receiving core, and I get to have the receiving core come with him, I would rather have that pass catch team than I would KJ Jefferson and his receivers.
That's a really good point. And not a knock to the other SEC media, but don't you feel like we like KJ Jefferson and Sam Pittman a little much because they're very easy to work with and affable? I feel like there's always it reminds me of the James Franklin when he was at Vanderbilt. It's like, well, I mean, he's beaten nobody, but everybody kind of likes him because, man, he will do an interview with anybody.
Yeah, I think Sam Pittman's perceived quite fondly, and that's fine when you're on the way up. And he did a great job turning Arkansas around because it was right down there in Vandyland, and he got it going. But I'm wondering right now if it's plateaued.
Yeah.
And I noticed Caleb, nor you have mentioned Brady Cook of Missouri yet. Is there a reason for that?
We haven't mentioned Brady Cook or Missouri, but Caleb likes Missouri a little more this year than others.
A little higher,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
As a matter of fact, Carson Beck is ahead of Brady Cook at Missouri, and I'm going down the list.
Well, and well, he should be. Carson Beck, I saw enough of Carson Beck to know the guy can throw the ball, and he's got really good receivers, and we know the talent surrounding him at every position at Georgia. So I don't expect him to flop, and if he does, Georgia will have put Brock Vandegrift in there. I don't think there's a big gap between those guys. The thing I wonder about him, Carson Beck, is how will he handle pressure? The pressure of going for a third consecutive national title. This is historical. And he's also the pressure succeeding Stetson Bennett. If Stetson Bennett was still the quarterback, I'd bet on Georgia winning 3 straight, and I would do it with great confidence. I'm not so sure now.
Yeah, that moxie in the fourth quarter got pretty special as it grew throughout his career. It was kind of okay in the beginning, then it got like, whoa, Joe Montana-esque.
Yes.
So no, I don't have a problem with you saying that. I'm going to make this statement, and let me start with you, Caleb. You tell me if you agree or disagree. If Joe Milton is not pushing for postseason awards, I want to remind everybody there are 3 in the beginning. There's 3 all SEC quarterbacks, and there are 2 typically at the end. They're not 3. If he's not pushing, he's not a strong 3 or a pushing 4. Tennessee's not pushing for the college football playoff. Is that a fair statement or too simple of a statement now that I made it?
That's absolutely a fair statement.
Too simple is what it is.
Yeah, it's real simple.
Weigh in on that, Caleb.
I said from the start that Josh Heupel's offense, even if you're a quarterback that's more ball control and not as efficient as Hendon Hooker, he's going to scheme. There's going to be at least 3 big plays you connect on in a game. And if you're a quarterback and you connect on those 3 big plays, they can really inflate your stats. They can be Tim Tebow throwing for 316 yards in an NFL playoff game because he connected on 3 big plays in that game.
Okay, so can I retract and say if he's not in the top 2 at the end of the year, Tennessee's not really pushing for a college football playoff position? If Joe Milton isn't playing that well where he's a top 2 quarterback in the SEC, then they're not pushing for the college football playoff. Too strong?
Maybe a little bit. Here's the thing: when you look at Josh Heupel in his career, he's been a head coach 5 times. Think back to all the really elite offensive coaches in college football. Steve Spurrier always comes to mind. Bobby Bowden comes to mind, just to name a couple of those guys. Urban Meyer had great offenses. When did these guys ever have a bad quarterback?
Nah.
I mean, Joe Milton might not be in the running for the Heisman at the end of the season. He might not lead the SEC in passing. But in this system, and you look at the track record, you just feel like he's going to be doing pretty well. And the offense will be doing pretty well because the elite offensive coaches, they don't suddenly become bad or even mediocre. They're always good. The range goes from good to great. I think Joe Milton can be good. I don't know that he can be great. But then again, consider the supporting cast around him.
Yeah, Travis says on the message board, my statement would be too strong. The running backs are really good too, and we are a running team. Just saying. Fair, but at the end of the day, at the end of the season, if Joe Milton's not viewed as one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the nation, I don't think this is making a push for the college football playoff.